how do we, in our own communities, even in our own families, even with our partners or our teenage child or our best friend who we see suffering, how do we then, make people understand the magnitude of why we need to change the kind of food we're buying and the kind of food we're eating, the kind of food we're growing, the kind of food we say yes to other people growing for us. Secondly, I'd love to just talk about the idea that one of the simplest things we can do to stop most of the confusion we experience as consumers of food every day is to move from product-based thinking. If you look at the average shopping trolley, you'll see that usually more than half of it is full of products, to produce. Because we have a lot more control and a lot more transparency when we move the needle over towards produce. At least then we're dealing with farms. At least then we know exactly where something is grown if we want to do some digging, and then we can talk about how it's grown. Whereas in the land of products, things are really complicated. Not only do we have this packet telling us all sorts of things on the front, which are usually lies to get us to buy the packet, but on the back there's the ingredient list, and oftentimes that's a really hard thing to decipher. And in my own journey, I think, while the book I wrote is very much spread across body, home, food and mind, food was really where things started for me in waking up as a person on this earth in this time, because I was sick all the time and I had tonsillitis several times a year, every year, and would be on antibiotics until the point where they stopped working. And I remember being 28, 29 years old in my little flat in Bondi at the time, and a friend visited me, and she saw this little spit bottle next to my bed. She's like, what the hell is going on with that? That's disgusting. I'm like, I can't swallow. I can't bear the thought of swallowing. So I was spitting into this little bottle. She said, we need to sort you out. You can't go on like this. But I was so sick that I couldn't do anything. And she said, look, I know it's a little bit left field, but have you considered maybe going to see a naturopath? And because 14 years ago, that was quite a hippie thing to go do. But I found one, and she was incredible and put me on the most revolting tasting herbs you could ever imagine that have now become things that I actually enjoy taking. And a very strict, very simple fasting, a semi-fasting diet for a few days, and I got better. And once I got better, she recommended that I attempt quitting gluten. And that was way before it was a cool thing to do. But I did it because I was desperate. And even though I'm half French, and the idea of not having my Sunday morning croissant was devastating to me, and I did cry, wailed actually a couple of times, I realised that over time I was well. I was better. I wasn't getting these infections every year all the time. But what the act of having to try and quit gluten did for me personally is so much more than the gluten itself, because I actually had to read labels for the first time in my life. And I started to realise just how complicated these labels were. And I wasn't just looking for wheat, barley, oats and rye. I was looking for hydrolyzed protein. I was looking for natural flavour. I was looking for additives that had been made from gluten-containing grains. I was looking for all sorts of things. And anyone who's had to actually look at these labels starts to realise that gluten is often the least of our worries when you look at the average packaged food. There is so much crap in what we're eating. And I see it now just going down if you go into a supermarket, I often do just to see what's happening out there. It really fuels the reminder for me that we're always dealing with someone who's just curious about this stuff for the very first time in their lives, to never judge, to never feel like someone's doing something bad by buying these products, because it's just a product of our culture that we do these things, right? I know that was me. But what it taught me was that the stress of trying to decipher labels was too much. And actually, just going to a farmer's market and buying ingredients to cook with started to become like a sense of refuge for me. But I quickly realised that I was a terrible cook. And all, like, up until I was about 30 years old, I thought that Char-Grilled Charlies knew how to roast chickens, but that wasn't ever going to be something that I would actually know how to do. But because I had to learn how to cook for myself and I had to go produce driven, I had to bring that French desire in me as a Frenchie to have things taste great. I had to learn how to cook. And it was an absolutely incredible awakening experience. And the feeling of starting to then realise what was in our conventional food and wanting to take my produce buying up a notch and go organic and biodynamic where we could, that was then another huge learning curve, because not only was produce desirable, and it's always the best option if you have to choose between non-organic conventional packaged food versus produce. Produce will still always win if that's where you're at budgetary or in your life right now and you haven't made a step to organic. Please don't panic. But to then go organic was just this next awakening of, oh my gosh, you know, the way we're farming, the way we're allowing our animals to be fed if we're omnivorous, all of these things I started to realise, wow, you know, and then when you learn what the cows are being fed, they're being fed grains, but not just grains, but these new genetically modified grains. And so it not only, for the first time in my life, I started to realise it doesn't just matter what I eat, it matters what I eats. And that's a huge consideration if you're a non-vegetarian person. But I guess my point being here is that we all go on these journeys, right? We all have moments of confusion. We all have moments of feeling like we don't know enough, we're never going to be able to do a great job. Wherever you're at right now, just start from there and think to yourself, if your wish list is to be able to eat all organic food, non-GMO food, there's a couple of things we need to do. One, we need to set ourselves like a really easy, quick winning goal. And I always say to people, the best thing you can do is to actually just start with the 3 highest volume items in your weekly shopping. So maybe you guys are big on carrots or apples you love. Maybe the kids go through a couple of kilos a week. Maybe everyone's a huge fan of chicken if you eat meat and things like that. And just think about what the 3 biggest volume items that you have in your weekly shop and just switch those over. Just start there. You know, because then you actually start to feel like you're making a difference. Because often I need to go organic just looks like this huge unattainable goal to the average household who's busy, who's on a budget, who's finding things tricky to like try and find 5 different places to shop for everything that they need. You know, this is how we're not very well set up yet to make this easy. And I think if you just go for your top 3 items, that makes you feel like you're really making a difference. And really, food is where we're most exposed to toxins. Yes, we've got our cleaning products, yes, we've got personal care and all of those sorts of things, but we're eating and putting things inside us daily, 3 times, 4 times a day. And so it's really important that we start to look at the toxic load of our food and lower it. However we can. So go organic on your top 3 things. That's just something we can all do this week, would be my number 1 tip. Number 2 tip is you need to kind of figure out how we can convince our families that this matters. Often, especially women, I'm going to implicate us here, ladies, we will have 20 tabs open on the internet. We will be a member of 50 billion different chat groups. We will be researching everything, watching every documentary until 12 o'clock at night. We will, be signing petitions, sharing petitions. But often our families are left out of this amazing journey that we're taking ourselves on, and we just give them the end resulting, we've got to do this because it's killing us. And the reason you're laughing is because you know that that's true, right? And so we need to think about what a great marketing campaign looks like for our families to get on board with us. And this is a really interesting thing to work on and to figure out, because not every partner's going to just jump on the train because you're excited. We need to take them on a journey. And I always liken it to breakups, where the person who does the breaking up with someone, they've had 6 months to premeditate how their life's going to look after this breakup. But the person who gets broken up with just gets told their entire life is going to change that day, and they're expected to just be okay with that. So I know we're not breaking up with people, this is not that bad, but we need to think about how we warm people up to the idea of making the changes we're so excited to make. Because chances are, if you're in this room tonight, you are excited to make some great changes. And so think about the idea of doing things that you love together, like cooking together. Think of being the change more rather than telling the change quite so much. And by that I mean, just saying, let's just sit down and watch this documentary. I've heard it's really awesome and I'd love for us to watch it together so we can talk about it together instead of watching it and reporting back. Most people that we love, even though they love us very much, don't like just being told what's happened. They like to be a part of it if it's going to make a major change in the household. And then I guess the other thing about being the change is just do things quietly. And often people will go, wow, that's delicious. Or what'd you make? Or how, what's in there? And often, whether it's you who's the change maker when it's you who's the change maker, everyone loves delicious food. So that for me is like the strongest marketing campaign for moving people over to whole, organic, from scratch cooking. It's just making stuff that tastes amazing. So if you're going to start to, and Marcy is going to take us through some gorgeous ideas for healing our guts and some of the foods that help us do that. But there's nothing more amazing than beautifully cooked roasted vegetables, delicious pilafs with heaps of herbs, and really bringing abundance, an idea of abundance and generosity into these transformations that we want our families to make, means that we're going to be able to get people on for the ride, right? Abundance and generosity, not I'm going to take away every chocolate biscuit you ever loved. Because this is what sometimes, people feel like, what do you mean I can't eat my chocolate Monties anymore? And whereas if you just secretly research, do a couple of little experiments, make a couple of amazing biscuits, and figure out one that is going to be a fantastic replacement, just offer it up and go, wow, that's amazing, you made that? And by the way, those just aren't going to be in the fridge anymore. You know what I mean? And I think we need to think about how we market change. We're the passionate ones, we're in the room, but we then want, at least 20 of our favourite closest people to come on board with us, because as Jonathan has so rightly pointed out, there is a huge concern for the way our food system is going in this direction that it's going in terms of commercially. So in terms of packaged food though, because sometimes we do still have to buy packaged food and sometimes you might still buy crackers or chips, a couple of the things that you can do to start cluing into whether there may be genetically modified ingredients in those packaged foods are, number one, made from local and imported ingredients. So even though in Australia, we have a little bit of canola, there's a couple of other little small pockets of GM farming, and Madge, by the way, is a fantastic resource to keep up with. If you're one of my peeps and you haven't heard of Madge before, the digest that Fran and her team sends out, it just keeps you in the know of everything that's going on in our country when it comes to GM foods. But I like to look at local and imported ingredients because I think, okay, imported, corn, soy, sugar beet, and cottonseed. And then I think, right, imported, and it has one of those 4 things in there, I'm sending an email. And someone in the Low Tox community did this last week. I think it was Tyrrell's Chips, sent an email because they saw local and imported, and they didn't think that it would actually be the potatoes, but there's a huge issue with GM potatoes now. And they were like, oh my gosh, that's my favourite chips crossed off. But if we don't send these emails, if we don't get curious, if we don't just say, you know what, I want to double check whether there are any genetically modified ingredients, we have the right to know. And if you get an email back and they say, yes, actually, our potato, because they generally tend to email back. The ones who don't email back, I'm even more concerned about. I actually followed a free-range pork brand that was endorsed by a celebrity chef around social media. It was like, what are the pigs fed and how are, because free range, as a lot of us know, doesn't mean much. I would like to know what the pig's diet is and are there genetically modified grains in the mix? Nothing on Facebook, nothing on Instagram, nothing in their customer service replies. 3 emails I sent, and I think the silence speaks volumes. So get curious and send those emails, because either they're going to be deadly silent because they're trying to avoid replying to you, or they'll reply and you'll get the information you need to make an informed decision. But I think based on Jonathan's presentation today, it really is about caution. Europeans do caution a bit better than Aussies and Americans. We tend to go, she'll be right, mate, and then, a whole bunch of people are really sick. Maybe we've got to do something about that. But, you know, if anything, you know, just looking at the history of some of the companies who are the founders of GM technologies in food systems, I mean, you know, they don't have a great track record. So, you know, caution is definitely something worthy of our time. It's worthy of our curiosity, and it's worthy of us thinking, right, if there's corn, soy, sugar beet or cottonseed in anything I'm buying, and by the way, because of the drought at the moment, a lot of the cattle are being fed cottonseed. Unfortunately, grapeseed left over from the wine industry. There's all sorts of things going on with the feed of cattle. You know, we have to start asking questions, because if there's anything I've learnt in building a community as large as mine now, it is if we band together and we ask these questions and we let them know that we are concerned and that we will not be buying their product if they continue to move forward, either feeding their cows that, or either using corn from a GM farm in America to make their corn chips, whatever that food might be, they're not going to make what we don't buy. Like, that's basic business 101, is you need customers to succeed. So as customers in this room, let's all band together and start to get curious, and because what we do makes a difference. So I'm going to hand over to the amazing Marcia, who's a true pioneer in the space of organics. I'll let you introduce yourself in more detail, but she'll be talking to us really about gut health and focusing in on some of the things we need to do to repair as well as nourish our guts. And I'm really looking forward to her presentation, so I'll move on. And if anyone has any questions, I just want to remind you, we'll have a Q&A in about 25 minutes with all of us on the stage.